Hello everyone, and welcome back to another edition of Indexer Office Hours. Today is the 25th of April, and this is IOH 104. If anyone is new to Indexer Office Hours, this is the town square for graph ecosystem participants to come together and discuss the most important topics that are relevant for indexers. And by that token, we love participation. This is a discussion. So at certain parts in today's conversation, please do contribute to the conversation via text in the text box or by unmuting your mic. And if you're having any issues unmuting your mic, let me know and we can get that sorted for you. Just as a reminder, this session is going to be recorded and public and available on public channels like YouTube. So if you're concerned about privacy, please bear that in mind. And with that, let's get into today's agenda. So I usually start off with the opening remarks, but looks like we don't have a GRT IQ episode this week. So we're going to go straight into repo work. So Anna, if you're here, fire away.
Thank you. Abel, can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. Welcome everyone to Repo Watch. We have quite a busy schedule today, so let's go right in it. So we've had a new version of 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗀. This is version 2.43. This version adds the first phase of Kaplan, I think that's how you say it, which is an embeddable consensus layer implementation. And this replaces the embedded consensus layer light client. This is disabled by default and is enabled by internal CL command line support. I know that in the past, there was another CL for 𝗟𝗶𝗀𝗀 that was showing some errors. So this seems to be moving forward towards fixing that. This release also removes support for BSC, adds more block snapshots for Bohr polygon, introduces writing logs into files by default. So to your data directory logs 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀log with log rotation enabled. This also adds gas bailout parameter to trace RPC methods for the functionality, which was previously hard-coded. And there's an initial infrastructure for diagnostic systems added. And if you want to learn more about this, you can check out this link. And I can see here that Matthew is saying that he has already deployed 𝗟𝗏𝗀𝗀𝗀 2.43 and it seems to be okay for early testing. And you're still using a Lighthouse CL still. And not trying the new CL at this time or anytime soon. Thank you for that. Okay, moving on to the next one, which is a new version of Get. This is version 1.11.6. This is a maintenance release. And it fixes minor issues and adds log management features. So again, log rotation has been added and it can be activated using the log rotate flag. And you have a bunch of additional parameters to manage that, including to add a path plus other compression, max size, and so on. Let us know if you've tried this version. Next release is Nethermind, so release number 117.4. This is a low priority release intended only for nodes that are syncing from scratch. So if you've updated your Nethermind nodes to 1.17.3, so the release from last week, you don't actually need to add this release at this time. But what it does is updates the sync pivots in the configuration file and updates Sepolia boot nodes to address peering problems. Next release is 𝗟𝗀𝗀𝗀𝗀, and this is version 1.7.4. This includes a fix for the format of headers sent via WebSocket connection. So if you're running an RPC node that is serving WebSocket endpoints, then you will need to upgrade to this release. Otherwise, you are fine to stay on the previous release. We have had 3 new alpha releases for Arbitrum Nitro. These are releases releases 2014, Alpha 2, Alpha 3, and Alpha 4, and they all have some improvements, but I think a full release is coming soon. You can check more details in the agenda here. On consensus layer client for Prism, we have had a new release. This is version 4.0.3. This release has a number of important fixes, and it is a recommended upgrade for all users. But most notably, this release contains fixes for bugs in the external block builder, code path, and key manager. In Prism CTL, in this release, support for writing signed validator exits to disk has been added. Support for engine exchange capabilities have been added, and support for modifying Genesis.json for Capella has also been added, plus additional flags. Okay, so Jim is saying Avalanche also has had an upgrade today, and you need to run 1.10 version of Avalanche Go, so your nodes will hold otherwise. Thank you for that, Jim. And I will make sure to add the Avalanche Go repo into this in future releases. Moving on to consensus layer clients, Teku hasn't had a release, so skipping Teku. Lighthouse has had a release. This is version 4.1.0. This is a high priority release for mainnet users. So it fixes an issue which caused excessive CPU usage shortly after the mainnet Capella upgrade. So users on version 4.0.1 or earlier should upgrade as soon as possible. And this release is less important for users running 4.0.2 RC0 because that release already contains a good enough fix. However, this release is more accurate, so if you do have the time, please upgrade to 4.0.2. And the project expects all conditions that have caused excessive CPU usage to not return. However, we are all encouraged to contact them if they do. Also, in a previous release, we encouraged users to disable mevboost and reorgs. And with this release, you can re-enable them again. There's one thing that is breaking in this release, and this is that the minimum supported Rust version has been set to 1.68.2 to address a serious bug in a prior Rust release. And there's a few other details, but I won't go into them. Okay, on the graph stack, we have had a new release on indexer service and agent. So this is release version 0.20.16. Now this release is identical to release version 0.20.15. However, all indexers are encouraged to change to this release because the previous release contained some packages that shouldn't be there. Again, I left the release notes from the previous week so that you can see them again, but I won't go through them because contents are exactly the same. And with that, this is all I had for this week. If there are no comments, over to you, Juan. Thank you.
Thanks, Anna. Okay, I see there's no new comments. Hey, Payne.
So let's start with Protocol Watch. Getting into forum governance, we have 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗀𝗀, which is exponential query fee rebates for indexers. There's a new clarification from Justin regarding curation tax and protocol fees. This GIP, and by this I mean 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗀, doesn't modify curation tax or protocol fees, but they'll be watching how it evolves after exponential query fee rebates are introduced to see if there will be any modifications to curation tax or protocol fees as a separate thing. Next up, we have 𝗨𝗂𝗂𝗧, which is L2 migration helpers. There's an interesting discussion regarding the implications of the migration on existing subgraphs, which kind of generates similarities to the N-1 support problem regarding upgrade of subgraphs. Moving it to L2 basically generates the same thing, where a subgraph is all of a sudden removed from the indexing rewards pool, so to speak. So you have the same issue of indexers basically closing the allocations and stopping the support for that subgraph while the migration is happening until they can actually pick it up again on the other side of the migration hole, so to speak. So basically when it actually gets published to L2. So there's a discussion going on around this potential problem and how to potentially have a solution at the gateway level to have kind of create proxies at the gateway level to basically nullify or diminish this problem as much as possible to make the migration as smooth as possible. Next up, we have 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗧, which is a new GIP regarding timeline and requirements to increase rewards in L2. This is GIP, I think, in response to all of the discussions around the 5% on Arbitrum, 5% index rewards in Arbitrum, to, I think, better specify the criteria to be able to increase the rewards and basically make it so that it's easy to know when it's actually going to happen and whether it's going to happen unless those criteria are going to be kind of met, so to speak. There's going to be further discussion about this topic further down this episode, so stay with us for more updates on that. Next up, forum research. We don't have any new updates since last IOH, so I'm going to skip it. Contracts repository, we have a few chores as well as some testing and new implementations of the exponential rebates, as well as removing the rebate pools. All of those are linked in the agenda. And for the network subgraphs, we don't have any updates this week, so that will be all for Protocol Watch. As I mentioned, 𝗨𝗂𝗲𝗂𝗧 is going to be covered more extensively in a few minutes, so basically stay with us. And with that, I'm going to hand it over to Abel.
Thank you very much. And yes, as Juan was alluding to, we're going to be speaking about 𝗨𝗨𝗲𝗂𝗧. So if I could invite Pablo to the stage, feel free to take it away, my friend.
Hello. Oh, I said I was going to discuss this in a short while. It was a very short while. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here. Thanks, Abel. So I'm going to share my screen. Moment. So I can show you folks 𝗨𝗨𝗲𝗂𝗧 and we can quickly go over it. I, of course, recommend that you folks give it a read as well, just in case we miss anything today. Can you see my screen by now?
I can't for some reason.
Yeah, it's just loading for me, but I think, yeah, there we go. We can see it now.
I can see it now.
There we go. Okay, cool. So, yeah. Let's see. Can you hear me well, actually? Because I'm hearing a sound, and I'm not sure if it's my mic breaking or if I'm...
You sound good to me.
Okay.
I think, yeah, you sound good to me.
Cool. Thanks. All right, so the main idea of this GIP is we've been working on the Arbitrum migration for a bit more than a year now. And our focus has been to do it safely and to do it in a way that keeps the protocol running while we do this big switch to the new network. But at some point, we think, and this is our team, agent node smart contracts team, we think it makes sense that we should migrate fully to L2. And from what we've heard from other protocol participants, this is kind of the general consensus. That is, we want to move operations to L2 and leave L1 behind. And to do that, because indexing rewards are such a big incentive for indexers, it makes sense that they should move to be 100% issued on L2. That's the general idea. But we can't just, flip the switch, turn them over to the other network, and then just forget about it, because subgraphs that are indexed on L1, indexers are kind of stuck in L1 with a stake there, and delegators too. So basically, for all protocol participants, moving from L1 to L2 is not a very straightforward thing where you just push a button and it's done. And also, we don't want to do it like in one go, because it's a bit risky in the sense that we're like doing a big bet and moving to a network that is not bootstrapped, so to speak, like the L1 network is. So we want to do a smooth migration and a smooth rewards shift from L1 to L2. So this is where this proposal comes in, and the idea is we're currently at 5% of rewards in L2 and 95 in L1. This was what we've called stage 2 of the migration from the beginning, and now stage 3 is we're deploying the migration helpers, and this means that curators, subgraph developers, indexers, and delegators will have a way to migrate their state, so stake, subgraphs, curation, and delegation, from L1 to L2 with a few clicks, a few transactions, hopefully not a lot of wait time, so just a few minutes. And then, you can switch your operations there without having to go through, the unstaking, the withdrawal periods, and so on. So what we're proposing is, when that happens, let's bump to 25%. So as soon as people are able to move freely to L2, and this includes, very importantly, people with vesting contracts that would otherwise be unable to use those GRT in L2, as soon as there is a path to do that, so right after that, we move to 25%. And this would be like a big incentive especially for more indexers to migrate stake over to L2. But also, as more indexers migrate to L2, this also, it has a positive feedback loop with subgraph developers that now have better, they can expect better QoS in L2, and therefore they can deploy subgraphs there as well. And so this should kind of kickstart a bigger migration process. So we propose that 2 weeks after that, if everything goes well, then let's move to 50%. This would be conditional on, some participants actually using these migration helpers, us making sure that everything works properly, that nothing broke through the process, and then we saw some increase in the L2 participation. And then wait for, and the proposal is about 2 months. So this is like an hopefully ample amount of time for us to validate that it all works properly, and this split network setup is still working, and there is a lot of people that are moving to L2, as we would expect if people are happy with how L2 is working. And also that the QoS for subgraphs on L2 is similar to the one on L1. So we're not moving people over to a broken network, so to speak. And that would put us at 95%, which is kind of the exact inverse of what we currently have. And by then, I would expect that most participants will have migrated to L2. There might be some stragglers, of course, and in particular, we're not moving straight from 50 to 100 because there might be some subgraphs that take some longer time to migrate. We don't want to put them in a position where if they don't migrate, then they lose the ability to query those subgraphs because there's no incentive to keep them indexed. So maybe their QoS or the capacity of indexers left behind in L1 will be lower, and that will incentivize to give them that last jump. And then eventually, maybe a month after, if 90% of subgraphs have migrated to L2, then we bump to 100%, and we call this a complete migration. We kind of say L1 protocol is no longer functional, or, I mean, it will be because you can still do things there. There just will be no incentives to do so, at least from the indexing rewards perspective. So that's the general idea. This was the GAP. If you look here, if you want to give it a read, there's a bit more detail on what the requirements are at each step. So for 25%, we would require first to deploy all of the migration helpers, and this is for subgraphs, durations, state delegation, and this includes testing contract migration helpers. And also, very importantly, indexer agent support for running L1 and L2 with a single instance of the indexer agent. And this, together with the gateway fix that Juan mentioned, would solve the N-1 issue on subgraph migration, because indexers could opt in to keep serving subgraphs on L1 for a short while after they migrate. Obviously, this will be up to you if you don't want to bear that extra burden of keeping the indexing. But since that subgraph is also going to be on L1, on L2, and you're going to be like sharing the same graph node instance, it should be sort of free to keep serving it, and you would keep getting query fees on the L1 side. So it's kind of a win-win if you do opt into that. And then next step, bump to 50%. It's not a lot of requirements on top of the 25% bump, but it's mostly validating that some subgraphs have migrated and some indexers have migrated without putting a very strict number here, mostly because it gives us the chicken and egg problem of like we increase incentives or people won't want to migrate. And then the 95% jump is basically 2 months after that. If you look at the dates here, take them with a grain of salt. We do want to do the release of the migration helpers very soon. So maybe we can do the 25% bump around May 8th. This is very soon though, so I wouldn't be surprised if this gets pushed back a week or a couple of weeks. And then finally the 100% bump is similar to the 95% bump, but putting a requirement on QoS metrics and 90% of subgraphs there. And then, so this is kind of the JP. There's not a lot more here, but there were some very good comments by Jim and Data Nexus that there is some issues with delegators staying behind and not moving over. And maybe we should set up some criteria that a certain amount of delegators must have migrated, or a certain amount of delegation must have migrated before doing some of these bumps. My proposal to that would be maybe we could put some in the 50 to 95% bump, because until there is a lot more incentive on L2, it's going to be harder to convince delegators to migrate. And we also don't want to block all of the migration because some people just delegated and took a more passive approach to delegation that just deposit the GRT and forget about it. Besides that, we're going to do a big communications push to convince all participants to migrate. So there's going to be comms on Twitter and all the social media channels. And also there was a very good idea by Oliver about doing a POAP and maybe using a snapshot vote. We're going to think about the snapshot vote, see if it's feasible or not, but the POAP does sound quite straightforward. We definitely would push on that as much as we can on our side. And of course, we would hope that you folks and indexers communicate with your delegators in any ways that you have to also tell them, when you started migrating them and when you think it's a good time for them to also jump to L2. So that's about it. And I think at this point, I don't know how we're on time, Ebo, but I would very much like to open discussion and see if people have thoughts on this, generally understand if there's consensus about the general approach, if there's any concerns about specific values or requirements or things that you think might be missing. And about the delegators issue, I would also like to hear your thoughts.
Yes.
Yeah.
So just on time, we have the entire rest of IOH to discuss this, and the comments seem to be on fire. There's a lot of questions, so feel free to take as much time as you need.
Awesome, thank you. Hey.
Could I maybe start with just a
Yeah, sure.
opening comment, Pablo? First of all, again, thank you for creating that GIP, and thanks for being here again to discuss it. I'm just reading the comments coming in from indexers there, and I think Anton makes some really great points around the 25% milestone. And I just thinking it through in my head right now, it feels to me like the 25% milestone is going to be generally all about indexers, because that's going to be the thing that really incentivizes those of us who haven't made the jump so far to actually spin up an indexer on L2, whether it's via a dual agent or a completely separate instance, right? And through that process, there's probably going to be a lot of pain points we hit that on the indexer side that need to be addressed. And I feel once we get to steady state with that, indexers are, right, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Indexers are pretty clever people, right? So they're looking at capital efficiency between layer 1 and layer 2 as their decision maker, right? So right now, in terms of capital efficiency, it makes more sense to be allocating on layer 2 than it does layer 1. Most of us aren't doing that because we're waiting for helpers, and those that have already jumped on it are seeing the benefits of that. And that dynamic will change as the number increases, and all of a sudden the capital efficiency on layer 2 is far higher for allocations until enough indexers have moved to enough stakeover and delegators as well. Once we're sort of comfortable at that 25% point, then I feel like the game is more about delegators and curators and making sure that they're aware of what's happening. And there's been some really great commentary, like you said, on the forum post around how we can socialize this change to our delegator and curator community. And there was also this idea that I brought up around, is there some metric that we can sort of track related to delegators? I don't know if it's the ratio between L1 and L2 delegator stake or something along those lines, but I feel like we need something to measure the move of delegation from layer 1 to layer 2. The term I like that 𝗨𝘀𝗲𝗂𝗧, who is an OG indexer, used was sleeping delegators, right? So that's the big concern, at least my long-term concern for the migration. It's the sleeping delegators, some of which could be very large and represent quite a lot of income for indexers. Maybe they're not paying attention. So, how do we maximize the awareness of this program for our indexers and incentivize them to come with us?
Thanks, Jim. Yeah, that's really great and important thoughts. And yeah, I forgot to mention the whole reputation thing that some folks brought up as well. And I think it was you too. So yeah, I think Anton's point and that you echoed about maybe waiting a bit after migration helpers for that 25% bump. I think it could make sense. It does make sense that maybe doing it immediately be ideal. I think maybe in my mind, I was already assuming that it wouldn't be immediate, mostly because between one deployment and the next, we need to go through a council vote. And that usually takes at least a few days. And generally, the council vote, deployment plan and everything takes a while. But I would be very surprised if it happened less than a week after. But maybe we should formalize that and say there is going to be at least a week or two, I don't know what you folks would be comfortable with, between launching the migration helpers and actually doing that 25% bump. Mm-hmm. And obviously, putting the handbrake if something goes wrong in the middle, and then resetting the counter. So I think, I don't know, do you think that would address that concern if we specified migration helpers and then X amount of time and then we do a 25% bump, at least for that section?
I think so, at least a week. And again, like you say, governance is herding cats, right? So that's what a lot of it is, and that takes time. So naturally there might be a delay, but I think we probably need to be sort of mindful of that, not just sort of assume there's going to be a delay, but make a decision as a group that there needs to be a period of a steady state period of time between the migration helpers going live and the next bump in the rewards, so that indexers have time to deploy and also work out whatever gremlins will appear, and they will appear. When deploying to layer 2.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Okay. Unless there's any additional thoughts or different thoughts about this, I think we can incorporate that into the JP for sure. And then about the delegators, I don't know if there's any concrete thoughts on how we could structure that requirement. I was thinking privately with Ariel before, and I don't know, Ariel, if you want to share.
Yeah, I'm here. Can you hear me? I was originally thinking how we can really set a goal for delegators, and considering that the only thing that we can use are incentives, right? And they have a certain APY today by participating in the L1, and that will be reduced over time. So there will be a natural incentive to move. I think what Jim is pointing out is important, that there might be many of them that are pretty passive, and this is an opportunity to see which of them are really participating. And I think, Delegator has been lately quite passive, but it's a good thing that it becomes a bit more active, because they have an important role in choosing indexers that are performing well. So I think there will be some sort of a period of time where we'll try a few things, like trying to basically communicate as much as possible that this is happening. I saw around some idea of incentivizing through POAPs, like people that already migrated, getting something in return, like during the original missions. So by doing that, I think we'll have an idea of how the community is reacting. In every step, the council will need to send an on-chain transaction, so there will be some sort of, even if we laid out a plan with the timelines, the council will have the opportunity to wait a bit more on each of the decisions if we don't see that if we see that the network health is affected by the changing conditions. Okay. If I were to set up some kind of metric, maybe is the ratio of delegation to stake, but that's something that we need to maybe think about. Like what would be a right or good amount that we consider is healthy.
Yeah, that's the bit I've struggled with.
Another thing that I would like to
deciding what metric actually makes sense and then what number makes sense, right?
Can I add? Actually, I think the very important thing missing everywhere is the query fees. And what if our customers will still use Ethereum subgraphs instead of Arbitrum subgraphs, and they won't migrate? So, for example, we might see the situation where 90% of all query fees are still gathered on Ethereum, and our clients use Ethereum. So what will we do in this case?
So that's, I hope, partly addressed in the GAP, in that we are asking before doing that final jump that 90% of subgraphs have migrated to before doing that jump. We had a.
But what if, for example, something like a snapshot, which is generated, like most of the query fees is still on Ethereum, and in terms of the volume of query fees, we still have significant presence on Ethereum.
Yeah, so then maybe I think what we should do is specify, not in terms of number of subgraphs, but in terms of in terms of total query fees on L1 and on L2.
Yeah, because also I think there are a lot of, let's say, test subgraphs on Ethereum, like hundreds of them that are not particularly used. And I think they will lay there just doing nothing. And those definitely should be excluded from the computation.
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. I think we should reframe it to say not 90% of subgraphs, it's 90% of query fees that should be on L2 before we give the final push. Let me see what's going on in the comments. There's a lot happening in the chat.
Did you finish your thought, Ariel? I'm sorry, I interrupted you in the middle of your...
Yeah. I finished my thought. Like, what I try to say is like the only thing that can drive delegators to move to L2 are incentives, and clearly there are some people that even with incentives won't move because they are not watching. So I think it's important to communicate as much as we can. And the other thing is basically use the incentives. I think this is, again, an opportunity for delegators that has been a bit passive to actually participate a bit more. Probably there will be some reshuffling of if people get some attention into these things happening, they will be choosing indexers. Some of them probably will move to the same indexer. Some of them will change. But again, it's not clear to me yet what kind of metric we can use, but I will target anything that we consider is network, like proxy, something closely to network health. Okay, like if we see that low delegator participation creates some kind of network imbalance, I think that's the thing we should be watching. Today, maybe it's one of the things that the protocol has is the delegation ratio, and indexers can stake more as more delegation they have. So maybe a metric could be some sort of multiplier on the delegation to stake that we can use, this ratio. I'm not sure about the current values in the network, but maybe we can study what we have today, like what's the current value mainnet, and derive from that a reasonable target, let's say, okay? And so we can use and have as a reference point whenever the council can use as a reference point before committing to a next transition. That's my thought.
Also, do I understand correctly? So let's assume like a good scenario, very good scenario, when a lot of delegators actually move to Arbitrum and 50% of the rewards will not be sustainable, and actually the APR will be better on the mainnet. So I think this would be a great driver to step up and do faster. And basically the APR, let's say relative APR on the network may be considered as a good proxy metric, as it summarizes the total stake and the rewards at the same time. So just a suggestion.
That's capital efficiency, right? I mean, that's just capital efficiency. Layer 1 versus layer 2, right?
Yeah, true. Exactly.
Yeah, that's something that I don't remember exactly when we discussed that, but showing very like in a very prominent way, or like in somewhere in the Explorer, like the current the capital efficiency basically from on the L1 and the L2, so in the L2 or basically so you can balance your participation.
Yeah.
So that's another thing, another idea that we can use. It's in the same I would say category as communicating as best as we can these signals to the delegators.
I think that's a really good idea, and it's, to me, I'd visualize it as another tab on the Explorer right now. So we have participant, subgraphs, and network, and then you could have one called migration, where people can go and look at the statistics that we've deemed to be useful. One of them being capital efficiency, and delegators could, as part of some kind of instructional video or whatever the literature is that's being put out, be pointed to that dashboard in order to help them make a decision on whether they should or should not yet move their delegation.
I think actually Explorer is a great tool for most of the things. Basically, when a delegator logs in and sees his position on the layer 1, we can do a pop-up or something like that, hey, move to layer 2 because the rewards are 2 times higher there, and some incentivizations like that, and just a suggestion.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I think I can sync back with the Explorer team to incorporate this, because and there will be something that tells you, your indexer started migrating, so you can migrate to. But I think the idea of showing, your APR would be better on L2. I think would be a good incentive.
And also, I want as we're speaking through the whole steps, the last step, like from 95% to 100, we have spoken about this previously, but what if there's going to be like several hundreds, thousands of GRT still stuck on layer 1? And I think we really want to move faster, of course, but what's going to be like our threshold when we can't do it because there's going to be several millions of GRT wasted, not stuck on layer 1, but doing nothing on layer 1.
When you say stacked, you mean doing what in particular? Like delegating in L1 or doing something else?
Yes, these delegators. Well, actually, I think that there is like several 100,000 million GRT of sleepy delegators. Mm-hmm. And yes, it's really concerning if we will abandon them somewhere on August when we will switch from 95 to 1%.
I think this should be similar to other protocols in the sense of, if let's say again, I think it's important to target. I mean, why we want delegators to move, right? And I think the one thing we want is network health, right? That everything works, the incentives works in a way that the network can operate in a secure way, and the incentives are aligned, right? So even if we have waste in the sense of, okay, some GRT is in L1, is still in L1 and it's not being used, I consider like it's I mean, as long as the network health is good and everything is working, it's up to the user to choose, because like the same thing can happen with Uniswap or any other protocol where they migrated to, I don't know, V3 or V2. You could still have your funds in V1, and you would make any pool more efficient if you move the capital, but you can't force the users. So,
but you can earn rewards on V2 or V1 still, even up to date. If we're talking about
what rewards in the plan that Paulo laid out is like eventually, as long as the network health is good, eventually all the issuance will go to L2. So they will be sitting there, basically.
And what about, for example, query fees? Will they still be earned in layer 1 when we will? So when we're talking about the rewards, we're talking about only inflation rewards, not query fees rewards. Am I correct?
Yeah. Yeah, Paulo.
No, go ahead. Yeah, I think if you have an answer, go for it.
What I wanted to mention is this, like, okay, query fees is something that they can still earn, right? Because there's a network operating on the L1 still exists. Let's say you can't undeploy the contracts. People can still use them, and some people might prefer to use index like the L1 for some reason. They can still get the query fees, yeah, and as long as there's enough support and there are components run on the L1, people can still use it without even indexing rewards. And that's that's fine. Why not? If some people decide that that's the way they want to operate, it's the same thing. Like if you run a UI for Uniswap v1, you can still use it, right? So I don't think that's what is going to happen, because there are some network effects in having people using the L2, being cheaper, faster, and getting the indexing rewards, and like as long as more subgraphs move there, sort of staying in the L1 it's not like the rational thing to do. But there might be people choosing to be there. There might be, like, I don't know, 10, 3, 4 indexers getting query fees there and subgraphs there. And that's, I won't see that as a problem.
Yeah, that's a nice thing that we're keeping it this way. I think it solves a couple of issues. Well, thanks.
It's a good long term, it's a good question though, because in the long term, we have things like the gateways, which are currently hosted by Edge and Node, although that's changing over time, assumedly. So there will probably come some point where we can no longer support layer 1, right? And you may want to deprecate it, or whatever the council multisig can do to the contracts, I don't know, because you don't want to be responsible for them anymore, right? Maybe at some point the protocol just wants to pull the anchor up on layer 1 and just let the contracts deprecate, or whatever the process is for leaving them out there but inactive.
Yeah. I believe in open networks, so people can decide to support the thing they want, right? Like, so, we've seen cases of hard forks, and we have Ethereum, mainnet, the ETH, and there's ETC. Like, some people decided to keep on contributing to something else. But I think that the network effects matters. So many teams will be supporting this migration, and there are multiple benefits. It's faster, cheaper. And it's much easier to interact with the I'm seeing the comments, the Graph Classic. So again, you build something to be unstoppable, and then you want to sort of get or offer something better. I think people will decide if this new thing is better, and some people, I think it is. So we'll see. We'll see how incentives work. But I'm confident that many people will move on, and there will be probably a few indexers remaining there, but the network effect will play in this case.
I don't know about other indexers, but I'm certainly tired of competing for transactions against a bunch of people trying to buy green frogs on Ethereum. I'm kind of sick of that now, so I'm all ready for layer 2. Let's go.
That's good to hear. Okay, so I'd like to try to distill this conversation into things we can change on the GIP and kind of come to some rough consensus that we're kind of pushed to move forward with that. Would the idea of waiting until, I don't know, delegation in L2 is 50% of delegation in L1, be a reasonable criterion? What do you folks? I would say for the 50 to 95% bump, that is the
still feel like the 50 to 90% is something that, it's a pretty big jump. And I feel like we'll be able to get a more intelligent number as we're going through the process, and we see how many how many indexers and delegators are, awake and aware and doing the migration process. But if we see that the overall participation is lower, maybe we want to go from 50 to 75 or 50 to 80, where the capital efficiency is always better on Arbitrum. And that way people are incentivized to move, but, to a certain extent, that may not happen quick for a lot of stakeholders.
Yeah, actually, what do you think about separating this JP into two parts and let's agree upon 2 steps right now, and after 50%, let's have another JP in summer, or just not to mix everything up, because everything may change throughout time.
I was going to suggest something similar, but not split the GIP up, but more that I can't remember now, Pablo, how many phases we have, right? Or milestones we have.
Yeah, 4.
But rather than split the GIP up, it's really a matter of executing each step, letting the step run for a certain period of time, and then assessing, like we're kind of doing now as a group, where we're at, how everybody feels about it, making an agreement on whether or not the stats look healthy enough for us to move to the next phase or not. So my suggestion would be that we're not trying to carte blanche push this GIP through for approval, but the GIP itself is just 4 specific milestones, the numbers of which may change in terms of the rewards, but there are 4 specific milestones, and we stop at each one once we've executed it and have a discussion like we're having now. The first part,
Okay, so
just to finish that off, the first decision I think we need to make as a group is, do we have a delay between the helpers going live and then the first bump in rewards? That would be the first decision I think this group needs to make.
Yeah, on that I agree. I think if we can come to a consensus that a week or 2 after migration helpers, we can do 25 or something like that % bump, I would be very happy.
Yeah, I'd be happy with that.
Yeah, but just let's add a condition: if everything is bug-free and smoothly and something like that, just in case.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why on the GIP on each of the steps, I explicitly mentioned no smart contract bugs, and people are able to use the helpers and so on. So I think, okay, we can do that. I kind of feel that stopping for a vote at every step might make this stretch forever.
Agreed.
I'm a bit worried that if we want to stop and analyze every time the precise number and go through a governance process, I'm a bit scared that this will kind of stretch and will be mid 2024 and still holding at, 55% rewards or something like that. Whereas maybe we can kind of agree on some rough parameters and some criteria by which we would say, if this doesn't happen, then let's wait a bit more or something like that. I'm not sure what you guys think about that.
I fully agree. If we start trying to do signal votes or snapshot votes on every, it's death by a million governance votes, basically. I would be much more comfortable continuing the letting the discussion of the timeline continue in the GIP itself, and that this becomes something we discuss, every week or every 2 weeks, or whatever, the GraphOps team think is acceptable on IOH, and that the IOH is the touch point for, are we going in the right direction? Do we have consensus, or we do not have consensus? Because I would say most of the engaged community is on this call. But again, there's also this idea we have to throw a wide net, right, when it comes to consensus. So if anyone has a counter against that, where they feel like not enough people are allowed or are given the opportunity to participate, then I would like to hear about that, if there's any counter on that.
for me, that sounds quite reasonable. I think bringing it back here, and I think we could be explicit in the GAP about using IOH as a forum to have at least a check that we're still good to go before jumping to the next stages. And that doesn't necessarily mean that we need to do a vote all the time.
Actually, I thought about yet another thing. What is the latest time of our vested, not fully vested token lock contracts? Well, if we are going to migrate by the end of this year, I think we still have some token unlocks in December of this year, and they will be unlocked on Ethereum.
Yeah, some contracts end in 2024 December.
Right, so for those that have vesting contracts, the migration helpers provide a way for you to deploy an L2 version of your contract. And then anytime you want, you can keep sending tokens between those two contracts. So you can't release tokens on L2 until the end of the final vesting period. But until that time, you can always send as many tokens as you want from L1 to L2, from L2 to L1, using the token lock migrator contracts that we want to deploy. So you can stake on L2 using that L2 contract. You can migrate your L1 stake to L2 in the name of that L2 contract, and then you can use that L2 vesting contract basically as your L2 identity for that L1 contract.
But that's actually a higher threshold than we have now, right? Right now, if we want to take out something from our contracts, we need to almost pull out everything because it counts as surplus compared to what is invested. And now, if we partially move to L2, we don't only need to surplus, but we also need to leave at least 100K behind on L2. So it's an even higher threshold to try to remove anything from the vesting contract before it's fully vested. And when it's fully vested, I'm still not 100% sure what is going to be the path to sort of release stuff from there.
So once it's fully vested, you can release any tokens that are held by the contract. So whatever is staked needs to go through the unstaking process, but any tokens that are held by the vesting contract will be yours to take out as soon as the vesting ends. And I agree, it adds some extra burden. It makes it a bit harder to release if you're split between L2 and L1. There was simply no other way that I could find where you could have an L2 counterpart of the vesting contract without breaking or allowing you to double spend, or in some other way, circumvent the vesting time. The only way that I could find, that we could find, is the L2 vesting contract. It's just a regular vesting contract. It just only allows you to release at the end. And then you can always, move your tokens back to L1 and release them there if you have a surplus.
And at the end,
I agree, it's tricky. It's just I couldn't find the best solution.
Can I suggest that maybe posting that case or setup in the forum so we can ensure we're on the same page and see and to validate that the way it works, works for you. I think it's going to help ensuring that we are talking about the same thing. I think it was Cohen who raised this.
Yeah, I definitely still have a lot of questions on the partially unvested part contracts.
Yeah, let's do that. I think it's going to help. Posting in the forum, or maybe we can chat in Discord. But what about this setup? What will happen if this happens? And then we validate and maybe give you some better answer and see if it works. Okay.
Yeah.
And also another question about the bridges. There will be a bridge launched by the graph itself, as I understand, not as a part of migration helpers, but for those who want to have some GRT unstaked on Ethereum and want to bridge it to Arbitrum. So they might use the graph bridge. And for example, what about some bridges like, I know on Connext, at least on the previous version, there was the possibility of bridging GRT. Have we thought about engaging into some bridges just to get better exposure, let's say it like that, of the possibilities that GRT might be used on on Arbitrum?
So the bridge the graph bridge, that is already deployed. And just to be clear, it's a bridge that we developed, but it's a bridge that is integrated with Arbitrum's default bridging mechanism. So not like completely separate from it. So you can actually use it by going to bridge.arbitrum.io. So it's like deeply integrated with Arbitrum's native bridging mechanism. In terms of other bridges, I'm not sure if Connect supports it now, but I think they might.
That version does not support. The first version used to support it, but the first version was deprecated.
Okay, then yeah, it's definitely worth engaging with them to see if they plan to support that in the future. Obviously, that part will be out of our.
I know that they do not plan to support it right now, but they were just not engaged by anyone from the Graph team. So I think there is a possibility for them to help us, let's say it, to migrate.
Yeah, I mean, Connect basically gives you a faster bridge at a price and at a slightly different trust assumption. So it definitely is a useful tool, especially for bridging between L2 and L1, I would say. From L1 to L2, it's still like 20 minutes, it's fast. But I do think it's worth engaging with them. And we do have some communication channels with them, so it should be possible for them to support us as well. Yeah, to be honest, I hadn't tried it, but I thought that they already supported, but yeah, we'll check with them.
Yeah, thanks.
All right, I think we're a bit over time, so maybe we can keep the discussion going either on Discord or on the forums. My preference is generally the forums because it's more sticky and people can keep reading afterwards, but yeah, happy to chat on Discord as well.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, let's do the forum because I think, yeah, it's just better to keep track of the conversations out in the open. But yeah, this has been fantastic. I've been just, a fly on the wall and listening to the conversation here. It's been wildly informing, and I love the engagement that we're getting on this because, it's clearly very important for the protocol. So, yes, special thank you to you, Pablo, for introducing this as a topic, and big shout out to everyone who contributed today. Yeah, as we mentioned, we're going to keep talking about this in the IOH. Let me know what makes sense as a cadence. Jim's not here anymore, but he said the first IOH after the helpers go live is a place to start, and then we can figure out a cadence from there. Yeah, we can figure out stuff. But it's been a pleasure, and we look forward to hosting you all again, same time next week. Take care, everyone, and have a wonderful week. Bye-bye.
Thanks, Abel, and thanks, everybody. Thanks.